Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and today I'm giving my first impressions of Reichbusters Reloaded from Monolith. You see, I have my own unique history with Reichbusters. Well, unique might be too generous a word. I'm sure a lot of people have had this experience, but I backed the original Reichbusters. I was very excited for it to arrive. It showed up. I played it. It was actually one of the very first reviews I did on the channel. I'll link to it down below if I remember. But overall, while there were many elements of the experience that I enjoyed, the overall experience basically had me turning to other games in my collection instead and letting Reichbusters go. I have too many dungeon crawlers, too many games that tap into that stealth mechanic that Reichbusters didn't deliver enough, and those lack of streamlined aspects to the game just made it a good game, but never really a great one. The two biggest things that held back the original Reichbusters for me, and there were several, but the two biggest ones were the stealth mechanics and then the sheer amount of tokens and abilities that slowed down the game. Those slowed down the game made it so that it was less streamlined of an experience than I would like it to be, and just got in the way of being able to sit down and just jump into it easily. The stealth, on the other hand, was a bigger issue, a far bigger issue, because then everything you did in the original Reichbusters caused a noise check, in a way that both slowed down the game, made it harder, and also was just not that thematic. As the new Reichbusters Reloaded rulebook likes to almost jokingly poke fun at it seems, that if you're in a crowded military base, walking into a room or walking down another hallway, opening a door, those are things you can expect to happen and they won't trigger any suspicion. There are things that will trigger suspicion, line of sight, being seen, throwing grenades into rooms. There certainly are things that will destroy any illusion of stealth that you had, but opening a door on its own is not one of those things. Now, I'm going to dive into my general thoughts of the game very shortly. I'll go into all the things, what the game is, because I'm kind of going back to my own callback with it, but I'll say that I'm very specifically calling this a first impressions because there were only 2 scenarios in this demo kit that Monolith sent out, and so I just have less experience with it than I would like, and I still do have some complaints, but I guess I'll start by saying that I do think Monolith has done a pretty good job retaining the core things of Reichbusters that were done well, while making it an overall more streamlined experience, with some caveats that we'll get to. So, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into this. This is Reichbusters Reloaded. Everything you see here is a prototype, rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. Reichbusters Reloaded is the newer version of Reichbusters. Reichbusters is mostly a dungeon crawler with a dab of stealth, got a campaign arc to it to a degree, and basically you're going on these missions, and you have your little top secret handbook over here with your mission files in it, where you got a mission over here, we have our little setup, we have our back over here, all the things, the heroes you're going to utilize, and you always will use 4 heroes. We have the specific ways as far as the objectives. You can go for cadet, veteran, or expert level as far as 3 different tiers of completing every mission. So you could just walk in, do the bare minimum, and call it a day, or alternatively, you can really try to go whole hog and get as much done on this as possible. Whichever your choice, ultimately the same idea is the same. You have your core 4 heroes over here, which I guess will vary based on the mission. You're going to dive into the mission, and you're going to take actions with those heroes, and one of the things that I specifically like about Reichbusters, or at least this version, I honestly don't remember if the original did this, but you have complete asynchronous, I don't even know what you want to call it, but basically you can take actions in any order you want. Not only is there not a set hero turn in this game, which a hero has to go, and then you move clockwise around the table, any hero can activate at any time, doing whatever they want, and jumping back and forth. You see, your heroes have 2 core actions they can take. You have your 2 little action tokens, and you take them and you place them on any one of these actions, whether you're opening a door, picking up objects, moving, attacking, any of these things, drawing 2 cards. You have a whole lot of actions you can take with your 2 action tokens, but I can take an action to move to a zone, and then someone else can take an action to go ahead and attack, and we can go back and forth trading actions. The other things you can do is you have your heroes and your hand of cards. Your hand of cards, of which you have your special cards, as well as your general deck of cards, they're going to give you a ton of ways to give you additional things that you can do. Now the problem is you have a limited number of ways to get those cards back. You can spend an action to draw 2 cards, that's great, but sometimes you want to just guarantee the moving or attacking, because sometimes when you draw a card, you might get a move or attack with it, but you don't necessarily know what you're going to get all the time, or at least you shouldn't be able to know because you're drawing from the top of your deck. And to that end, drawing 2 cards that might give you a move and an attack, or taking that guaranteed move, sometimes the guaranteed move is essentially worth it because you can't risk bad things happening to you outside of your control. Knowing that you can walk into a room, attack that person, knife that person, and then shoot that guard against the wall, being able to plan a perfect sequence is so much in this game that sometimes you don't want to take your actions to just draw more cards. Outside of that, you can go ahead and play cards. You can play cards whenever you want. You'll also draw one card at the end of the round, or one card per hero, I should say, and you can utilize those cards to both improve things. You can go ahead and spend them for example, the bottom results over here will often do things like adding extra results over here for defense or for attacking. You'll be able to add extra die results. You'll have things that let you do an extra area when making a move action. These over here often give you extra actions you can do. You have this action, Bloodthirsty, make 2 melee attacks targeting a different enemy for each attack. So you'll have different actions, and these cards, by the way, are so much fun. The cards, that's something that the original Reichbusters did do well, in the sense that you had this smorgasbord of unique actions. This is not a dry game, which you're a dry dungeon crawl in which you're like, I have 3 actions around and I'm going to move, attack, and open a door in whatever configuration. No, you're going to have your own unique abilities for the characters and how they operate that gives them a strong sense of thematic feeling to the way any one character works. You'll have someone like Brick over here who's very good at running into a room, shooting things down, becoming a bit of a behemoth that can't be tackled, moved, or in any way get in other people's way. You'll have other characters that help people move. You'll have characters that are just violent in all kinds of different ways. Everyone has their own feeling to how their deck lets them move, in addition to the basic actions you can take. And like I said already, you're going back and forth, and so that encourages a strong sense of teamwork as you play the game, where you really will work together. You'll be like, hey, can you play that action card that'll let you move with me across the room over here? You'll be able to move with me because I only have one move and I can't get here to kill that officer unless you actually bring me with you. And so there's a strong sense of collaboration, whether you're playing this solo and just trying to min-max it all, or whether you're playing with other players and asking for help. Hey, can anyone help me move this turn? Can anyone go ahead and throw a card that'll give me an extra die result? What are the things that the other players at the table can do to help you out in a pinch? Because you will always be in a pinch in this game, because this is where that stealth mechanic comes into play. While every mission has its own individual goals that you're working for, the thing that's common across the missions is you have a kind of before the alarm phase and an after the alarm phase. If you trigger the before the alarm phase too early, you will have reinforcements showing up every single round, which will very quickly make it very hard for you to accomplish your goals if you have the board flooding with miniatures too early on in the game. The flip side of that is that staying in that pre-alarm phase often involves a lot of sacrifice of the things you can do. You have all these weapons you start the game with. Each character has their own unique unique weapons they can utilize, as well as the ability to upgrade to those to Vril infused weapons, but those weapons can often feel incredibly powerful. I mentioned Brick over here. He can be rolling handfuls of dice, taking people out. The problem is, the very first time he does so, this is a 3 noise weapon, which means that noise track over here is going to immediately go 1, 2, 3, bringing you a lot closer to that post-alarm phase. Effectively, the way Reichbusters Reloaded handles the stealth mechanic is, instead of everything having stealth, you simply have a stealth marker set to wherever the mission is, and as you go through rounds, you're slowly getting to a point where eventually you will be uncovered. There's only so long you can wander around the base, slowly slitting a guard's throat and leaving little evidence behind, a body here, a grenade there, a shell there. All these things you're doing will eventually result in you being discovered. But yes, if you go ahead and shoot a weapon, depending on the weapon, it might cause 1 noise, making stealth a little bit more, a little faster. It might be a Brick's weapon over here, where he's rolling 3 noise dice, and that might give you only 1 round of being stealthy before you go to the post-alarm phase. Or again, that's going to be mission dependent, depending on where you start. Or you may throw a grenade into a room, and boom, the alarm is immediately triggered. And so you have a limited number of options at your disposal, but you're trying to spend that stealth area out of sight before you get to the enemy's turn. Because that's another thing that will break stealth. If you end the enemy's turn, and you have these guards in this watchtowers and they see you there out in the open, you are in trouble. That alarm will sound, and that only happens during the enemy phase. This is where you might have a slight thematic problem, because you can have a situation in this game where you wander into a room, you flip over a token, because you have these tokens that show the number of enemies, and as you flip them over, you see what you spawn. And so sometimes you're wandering to a space, you flip over a token, a whole bunch of enemies spawn, and then one at a time you walk in, attack, and walk in, and attack, and walk in, and attack, and you kill them out, and you're like, look, their alarm never went off. And thematically, that might bother you at first, until you realize, from a thematic standpoint, you're basically operating all at the same time. You're just taking turns because this is a board game. But more thematically, you all ran into the room, someone shoved the officer here, someone else slit a throat, someone else shot the guy, whatever it is you needed to do, all happened in the blink of an eye. And that's why doing your turn, nothing will really, well, some things will trigger. Noise will trigger the alarm, but people seeing you won't trigger it doing your turn, with some exceptions. There's a whole smorgasbord of enemies. Some of them have more awareness than others, but for the most part, you have the ability to kind of run in and do these quick, sudden operations that can clear a room of enemies while leaving you and your allies well set up to go ahead and pause. No one sees you. You have those, again, you have those guards in the various spots over here, and no one sees you. You've all moved immediately into this room, and then they're like, well, nothing's happening, nothing's going on. This is a clear courtyard, and you're ready to go ahead and spend the next turn bursting into this room and hoping to have the same degree of control happen. This combination of the stealth phase, the pre-alarm phase, and the post-alarm phase will give you different ways that you're trying to play this game. The first half of your game, and again, I'm sure it'll be mission dependent, scenario dependent, depending on how things are different, but that first phase of the game is going to have you trying to tactically plan out every single thing you can do with incredible precision. Can we move across the courtyard? Do we have to go ahead and move up these towers and take a guard out instead? Are we willing to risk a shot, because a shot will move the stealth tracker down, but then I can go ahead and get this guy from afar without having to climb up the tower, which I don't have enough movement for. You'll be constantly planning around all the things you can do given the core actions, the 2 actions you have, and then your hand of action cards, as well as possibly, do you even risk it? Do you spend an action to draw 2 action cards? Will that give you what you need to do? Your heroes also have their own asymmetric abilities. Now, don't be too overwhelmed by a player board over here, because you have a lot of abilities over here. These relate to the keywords on weapons, so when you see a weapon has precise, you can simply look down here and see what precise does. You can mostly ignore these until you're getting to the attack phase. They will not stop you from playing the game, so don't get too worried about the sheer amount of text the player boards have. I'm saying that because I was, and it's not an issue, or at least it wasn't for me. But your heroes do have a core ability, an ability you will want to take advantage of because they will make the difference between winning or losing. The idea that you can go ahead and have vengeance. Once per hero's turn, you can move into an adjacent area if there's at least one enemy there. That gives Claudine an extra degree of movement flexibility, where she doesn't necessarily have to rely on her actions or her actions cards in order to get where she needs. And each character's abilities will come into play in incredibly, again, that pre-alarm phase is so resource focused. It's so about how can I set myself up to get everything I need done and to be able to set ourselves up for the next round. The difference between ending in this zone or having 3 of your heroes end in that zone will make the difference between how well that next round will go. And so you're really trying to use every tool at your disposal to try to stay stealthy, take as many people out as possible, and get further into the mission before enemies start spawning. Which brings us to the second phase. The second phase is an entirely different way that you'll be playing. The second phase is a whole lot more spray and pray. Now, don't get me wrong, you'll definitely still be trying to weigh up your actions, your action cards, and trying to see what you can do to survive, but suddenly that need to avoid the alarm has suddenly gone. Now it's much more similar to a classic dungeon crawler in the sense that you're still trying to manage your resources, your abilities, your cards, your actions. You're still desperately rolling dice, seeing when you need to add cards to boost those results, and you're still trying to use everything at your disposal. But at this point, the need to avoid stealth changes the entire feeling of the game. And this game does do, Reichbusters Reloaded does do a good job of capturing both the pre and post-alarm phase, kind of giving you 2 different game experiences in every session you dive into. Now, this has been half, teaching you how to play, and I think it's also delved into the review aspect in terms of the way I've been talking about this game, but let's go ahead and just dive straight to the review part of things. I really like Reichbusters Reloaded. Now, I have a soft spot for Reichbusters to begin with because it was always, if I look at all the Mythic games, or I forget Mythic games, if I look at any game that I've wanted to like and kind of dropped the ball for me, there's a short list of those games that will stick out of my head as games I really wanted to like, and Reichbusters was one of them. And so walking into this one, I was, like when I first heard that Monolith picked up the title, I was very excited for it, but I was also hoping they'd make changes. When I then heard that they are making changes specifically around the 2 biggest aspects of the game, I was even more excited, and then I dove into this one being a little wary because maybe it would let me down again, and in one area it has, but in the bigger areas it has improved on the experience. That pre-alarm phase feels much better. The entire sequence, the pre, the post-alarm, feels like a very engaging experience, one that is very tactical and resource driven, and then one that moves into the open and you start being able to do everything. My biggest complaint right now about that is that very often you have tools at your disposal that don't really feel like they give you that much wiggle room. And depends on the mission you're going to be playing as, because you will have stealth markers starting at different spots, but starting your health marker on 4 and having a weapon that's going to move it forward 3, giving you only 1 round of stealth, doesn't feel like a real choice. And so, sure, you could have Brick go ahead and spray and pray that first round, but you are going to effectively be moving almost immediately to the next phase, and so I do wonder how many missions there are and how often it actually is useful to fire a bunch of weapons, because this time round, you basically only have 1 character, whereas she's Sally over here with her pistol, that's the only 1 alarm weapon. game. For the most part, you're going to be relying on O'Reilly, as well as Claudine, as well as using bare hand abilities over here. Speaking of which, Brick, by the way, is strong and rolls an extra die when you're attacking people with bare hands, so he actually has a chance of taking people out. But for the most part, you're relying on the few melee weapons, and then Sally's one-shot pistol is the only real decision that I found myself making around when to break stealth or not. Because otherwise, you're moving straight into the post-alarm phase almost immediately, and that wasn't as helpful. So I love the idea. I do wish there was a bit more wiggle room as far as making tactical choices. Even the difference between 1 and 2 noise versus 1 and 3, 3 just felt like it really removed all my options and limited the amount of real decisions I was making about breaking stealth or not. The other area that I felt this version was a little wanting in was the removal of all the tokens was a much better system. Having all these keywords on these things over here, having all your item cards, where's my item card deck over here, all these things, it kind of removed any of that necessity to constantly check a million different things, and that's overall much more streamlined. The one area, or the two areas I should say, as far as rules go, is for the first, and as a general sense, I did find the rules to be much longer and not as clear as I would like in some areas that had me constantly referencing the rulebook. Even after I learned the rules and dove into play, I still felt like I read a longer rulebook than the experience should require, in my opinion. From having read a lot of rulebooks, this felt like it was longer than it should be, and still didn't end up as clear as I wanted it to be. Meaning at the end of reading everything, I felt like I had generally good sense, and I dove into things, and then I constantly was rechecking things. What does trigger enemies working? And there's also things in the rulebook, and this could be translation issues. There's small little areas where it talks about the nature of permanent wounds, which permanent wounds aren't permanent, which is a weird terminology, but that's because of the fact that when you draw a wound card, sometimes a wound card will simply have you just taking a single negative effect, and then depending how many dice or depending on the numbers rolled, you'll possibly take this as a quote-unquote permanent wound. The problem is permanent wound doesn't mean permanent, it just means that sometimes you take a wound card, do the top part, and discard it. Other times you take a wound card and slot it under your board, and then you can get rid of it in other ways. But my confusion around small things, and there are a few things like that, that's just one that sticks out, where I had a degree of confusion over how do things work. There's active guards, there's active guards and inactive guards. Inactive guards are just tokens, except when they're not, because they're miniatures that were placed on the board doing setup. But that still led to a lot of confusion over, well, then how do I deal with miniatures that were placed on the board doing setup? Are they active? Are they inactive? Are they only active once they see me? There were a lot of small edge cases, things like that, that did make overall learning the experience harder than I would want it to be. Where I am now, I'm 97% sure that I've been playing it mostly correctly. I'm pretty sure I've been making the right judgment calls as far as how things work, but it definitely took me longer to get there than I would like, and I don't know how much of that could be improved, will be improved, or how much of it is just me. But I would say that the overall playing experience was significantly better than the original, versus the getting to that part, like the first few rounds of playing was just a whole lot of rulebook checking to make sure I understood everything as I thought I had, and then suddenly I'm faced with a guard staring at me, and I'm like, wait a second, is the alarm over? What happens now, and how does that work? So there's a lot of that going into it. Overall, though, I do think this is a much better experience. I love the experience of being able to trade actions back and forth. That's the biggest thing for me. The idea that you have this strong sense of teamwork as you play through the experience really made this a very engaging game. You are frequently asking other players at the table, do you have this? Can you help me move? Do you have an extra attack? That kind of discussion really led to a large sense of collaboration, which I can't oversell enough, because that was one of the strongest parts to me. And I've played this both solo and with other players, and as a solo thing, it feels like a very solid puzzle, and as a multiplayer thing, it feels like a cooperative game where you're working with others and really need each other to make your way through these challenging puzzles. And then eventually the alarm goes off, and you move into full spray and pray, which can be terrifying. There are these giant beasts over here that will try to kill you, but also can be incredibly satisfying when you take the things down that are in your way, and Brick in particular tends to shoot a lot of bullets at people. So, final thoughts-ish, and I know this kind of wasn't my usual format, but as far as final thoughts go, overall final thoughts on a first impressions, overall Reichbusters Reloaded feels like a very strong step in the right direction from the original game, addressing most of the core feedback that got in the way of the original experience being as good as I wanted it to be, and this one does that, making it a much better experience. The biggest issues I had personally were with the rulebook and the initial onboarding of the experience, but after that, I think the actual gameplay delivers a much better overall experience than what I got from the original game. Rating wise, I'm coming in at a tentative rating on this one because, again, first impressions and all that, but I'm going to come in at a 4.5 out of 5. I really enjoyed what this experience was doing or has done for me. I really hope that they can improve that rulebook and make it even better as far as things go. I will say it can be a bit of a table hog. I mean, most of this is fitting over here, but especially as smaller tables go, there's a lot going on, and I have a whole pile of miniatures off to the side that you don't see. But overall, it is a much better and improved experience on the original game, a 4.5 out of 5. As far as other game recommendations, if you're looking for something stealth-based, definitely check out Assassin's Creed. That is one of my favorite stealth-based games out there. And if you're looking for something more in the general dungeon crawler, rolling handfuls of dice and having fun, check out Massive Darkness for one that relies on strong hero asymmetry and focuses the entire time on just how much fun your heroes can have, and a little less so as far as hiding in the shadows. In any case, although technically Massive Darkness has an entire shadow mechanic, it just doesn't feel like a stealth thing so much as a tactical thing, but that's a whole different conversation. Anyways, until next time, I hope you found this helpful. I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and as always, I hope you have a good one.